it was different groups, again on Facebook, and it would be the churches that were in the low moderate income communities that were hit the most, texting into this or messaging into this group to those areas that were not hit as much. And with our community, we were like an island for 3 days, right? We didn't flood, but you couldn't get anywhere. So those messages would come in, and the more moderate or higher income communities would take the list that came from those churches into that message. We'd send it out at 5 o'clock in the afternoon to all of our neighbors. And the next morning, we had a 2-story entrance to the house that was filled to the brim with donations from people, and then coordinate driving it up to those areas. That is not the way to handle a disaster. So, Justin, can you say a little bit about how you landed where you are?
Okay, sure. Well, great to be here. Thank you for having me. Justin Knighton, currently with George Washington University as a fellow, helping their Alliance for a Sustainable Future really help to come up with solutions that are embraced by various sectors, political ideologies, backgrounds to really help advance a more sustainable future. So really grateful to be here on behalf of GW, as well as my own consulting with a variety of folks, including PaaL, to help broker, better communications outcomes. My background really is in communications. I ran a public affairs firm in California for about a decade, helping nonprofits, philanthropy, governments, CEOs, some really phenomenal clients like Disneyland and the Sacramento Kings, and others, as well as more traditional government, the intersection between government, business, and communications clients. Cut to the election in 2018 when the Camp Fire happened shortly after, and then Governor Brown was on his way to a press conference with then President Trump, term 1, and the FEMA administrator at the time, Brock Long, and called Governor-elect Newsom and said, "You're going to inherit this recovery. You're going to inherit this disaster. You need to come with me and stand at the podium and be part of this press conference." And so when the Governor-elect Newsom was there, he saw that the people that were disproportionately impacted by this wildfire, at the time was the most historic, deadly wildfire in California's history, were people who were older adults, people with disabilities, and low-income families, to the point about not having the resources to evacuate and get out. And he came back to Sacramento. I was one of the first calls to help come up with a game plan to change the way we communicate during before and after a crisis, to really help make sure that we're reducing those barriers from a communication standpoint. I'm sure all of us have horror stories of working with government or working with organizations that have just a bunch of messages that you're pushing out, and you kind of just hope that it lands and you hope that it sticks, or you hope that it resonates to the people you're trying to communicate with. Well, those of us in emergency management know that hope is not a strategy, and most of the time those communications don't do anything. And I love emergency managers, true emergency managers who are in the communities day in, day out, but a lot of times they don't have the infrastructure for really effective, robust communications, right? And those of us in the communications preparedness space, talking about before disaster, we love to communicate with like 80 pages of all the things you have to do to stay prepared for all the hazards that could potentially impact you. Well, the reality is that for those communities that are just trying to survive today, or just trying to get through putting food on the table today, looking at an 80-page document of all the hazards you could potentially be prepared for doesn't become realistic, right? And you think about financing and other things. And so really my sweet spot has been, right, meeting people where they are, which I totally agree with, and understanding how to communicate in a way that resonates with them. How do we think about our audience? How do we think about how we're trying to communicate, and not in what we're trying to achieve, but what we're trying to do to shift action change, right? How to shift behavior. And I did that at FEMA for 4 years, and it was a job that was very difficult, but I loved every second of it. Doing it across the external affairs portfolio, right? From congressional affairs to media, intergovernmental affairs, working with all the other communicators across the White House and federal government, all the way through the community level, working with mayors, all 574 tribal nations, partnership development, et cetera. So it was a really big portfolio. The good news is I had a really big staff, about 150 people at headquarters, regional offices that all have about 20 plus people, and then a cadre of staff, about 500 communicators that we could deploy at a moment's notice to support the country. And so had a great team to help do that work. But for me and those of us at headquarters who are the tip of the spear, as they say, to really help shepherd and guide a new way of communicating in a crisis, and doing that work to this day, and love it.
Quick story about how we connected. So
Yeah.
those of us who've come to this before, the first two PaaL Fintech disaster forums was because FEMA asked for it. We had live streamed from their headquarters, and the director said, can you explain FinTech, and can you introduce me to the people that actually do this thing you're talking about? And so we did a couple, and FEMA was at those, but we were always told, stay away from external affairs. If they don't like you, you will never survive in this industry. And then
That's so nice.
Then at Christmas, Jess and I were both at United Way does this annual resilience event. It's really lovely. And I got to do the closing keynote. And we talked about GSD, and the host said, you can't, the middle word has to be stuff. Don't get on stage. You know, this is a faith-based organization. And then Justin came up afterwards and was so approachable. I'm like, you're not the evil horned person that we were
I can if I need it, like my colleague at SBA, but that can't be your lead energy.
Yeah, no.
And what I love about the work that you all are doing in the fintech space and at PaaL is truly the moniker that I've been using in communications, right? Payments as a lifeline. I've been saying information as a lifeline for years. And so the fact that those two things run parallel, they complement each other, they're needed to support each other, is just a great union for this conversation. And I'm so grateful that this conversation is happening to really be the umbrella for the day, so that we can constantly in the room be thinking about who's our audience, what we're trying to achieve, what is our message, and to do the harder work, which is what isn't resonating and what's not working with what I'm currently doing, and how do I need to evolve.
And it's blue sky days. So often you end up meeting that partner that you should have met in the emergency operations center. It's too late. Stuff's going to get screwed up. The fraudsters are going to figure out that's what you've done and go grab the money or grab the resources. So now, and happy hour is when to connect, to have those partnerships. So that's on the massive scale. Heather, you figured out how to bring that to the so what of a community, like Chris and I were saying with our itty bitty hometown kind of stuff.
Yeah.
How did you land with what you're doing?
Yeah. So first of all, I just, again, thank you. And it's an honor to be here, even sitting next to you. I got, FEMA on one side and I got Kirsten on another. And even in front of you, I don't have the emergency background. I don't have the disaster background. I'm just a local that doesn't take no for an answer. And that's really it, where I'm the person that if you know me, I don't like the word no. I don't settle very well. And I simply thought of an idea where I go, God, we can do better. We deserve better. So my idea came from living in Sarasota when Irma. I've said Ermin. Ermin is a combination of Ian and Irma. But so Irma happened in 2017, and that was my first storm. And that, I'm from Ohio. We don't have them there. So I didn't know what to expect. But what really surprised me was afterwards, I thought even during, I'm going to see pictures. I'm going to know what's going on. I'm going to have a pulse on my city and my friends and my, family there. And I'm going, God, I can't find anything. I can't find any information. I can't find it. Social media is just as usual. There's nothing really in particular. And just prime example. If you aren't connected to that mother's group or the churches that are doing it, you can't find any information. And I found myself unscathed where I was technically okay, but I'm the person that raises my hand and says, I'll help you, and that's it. And to me, I think a typical local, right? I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a business person that says, whatever I can do to help, I'll help. So I found myself connecting the people that have to the people that need. And I'm doing this on social media and I'm trying to find information and it's a nightmare. And I just thought, God, we can do better. We can do better. So my entrepreneur brain kicked in and brain dumped every question I thought someone could possibly have in disaster, from where do I go for SBA assistance to, where do I find all the organizations that can help? It's not a lack of help. There is an abundance of help. Good luck finding it. If you're not connected to the right people or groups or mom's group or church, you're not going to find it. And the typical local, they don't know what a MARC or a DRC or a COAD or BOAD, they don't know what any of that stuff is. All they know is they either need help or they want to help. What I found after Ian was that people, especially Sarasota, was supposed to get hit, and it hit just South Sarasota and Fort Myers. So people in Sarasota had the supplies. They wanted to donate their supplies. They wanted to donate their time, and they wanted to donate their money. Well, if you don't know where to donate your supplies, you're not going to. The last thing you want to do in Florida is be considered a looter. I can tell you that right now. You already mentioned it. So people didn't drive around. You're not going to do that. And then as far as donating money goes, people want to donate their money. And that's where I'm excited about this part, is because people really do want to donate their money. But every single person, I have nothing against Red Cross, but people said, I don't want to donate to Red Cross. They wanted to give somewhere small and local. It wasn't a bash against Red Cross. It was just, they didn't want to just give to one big organization. They wanted to pinpoint and have it go local. So really, the whole goal of local relief is to provide one voice, one platform for people to go to where it doesn't show anything but. You're not going to see kids' school pictures and soccer games and traveling and all of that stuff. You're just going to find disaster information. So, for people before, during, and after, we are that one strength, and I knew we needed it in Irma, and then realizing in Ian that not only had it not been done, but communication was worse. Because now, in addition to the 3 mainstream platforms you had in Irma, now you had TikTok and Nextdoor, and you have YouTube, and good luck tackling any information or finding any information that you absolutely need on there. And you can tackle misinformation if it's all in one place. So that's really the whole point. And I've been hauling butt ever since Ian in 2022. So that's local relief in a nutshell, and kind of what we do and what we're trying to do. My accountant, he said, it's funny. He said, so many people say, oh, I want to change the world. He's like, you really do. And I'm like, yeah, I do. And I think we have the platform, but most of all, it's the people, it's you guys. It's not just me. It just so happens I thought of a tool, but it's for you guys to use.
Well, and it's a really, really cool tool. Very easy, very intuitive. If we could get that dropped into each community in advance, so people are comfortable with it. We've even talked about a pilot where you drop into a community with local relief, and everybody thinks a disaster is not going to happen to them. Talk to the people in Asheville, North Carolina. Talk to them in the Palisades, right? Never going to happen to me. And you talk to some of those folks. One of the ladies was in Palisades, was in tears. She said, I was in such a rush trying to video everything in my house so I could prove it to my insurance company. I left my cat. And she got to the shelter and realized she didn't have her cat. So preparedness. But so for the pilot, what we've talked about is everybody thinks it's not going to happen to them. So they're not going to sign up for local relief on their phone. I'll do it when the hurricane's on its way in. But you need to have this established. You need to have small businesses as part of it. So we talked about putting together a pilot, dropping into a community, and having a sweepstakes or something that says, Cedric, yes, you should participate in this, and just be ready and get those communications started. So help evangelize about this local platform. It'll make a huge difference, particularly in the 97% of our counties that are rural. So you've been Justin, at the front of true chaos communications, like stuff hit the fan, chaos communications. Keeping in mind we've got fintech and nonprofits in the room, what might be advice or input on what we could be doing? One of the worst things is the media's there, or somebody's there that's going to post to social media, and you don't have the right thing to say, and the wrong thing that comes out of your mouth. How do we better prepare?
Well, let me first ask for those of you who are founders in the room, if you could just raise your hand, people who are founders of a company, organization, thank you for doing that and being involved in the disaster space, because you're the agitators, instigators, and innovators that the world of disaster before, during, and after desperately needs to think differently on how we approach the challenges moving forward, the risk landscape. And I'm so impressed by your story and the work that you've done and continue to do, and others in the room. The risk landscape is going to continue to get worse, which means that our need to change and evolve is not only urgent, it is truly about life and death. And when I think about those stakes being incredibly high, I come down to how I come down to everything, which is communications. How are we communicating? How are we making sure that we're reaching the right people at the right time with the right message for what they need to achieve to support their work, right? Very, very similar to following the money, of making sure that the right resources get to the right people at the right time. Those ideas come together. In fact, when I think about the disaster space, I've always prioritized information and money, because that is what will enable people to be successful. And what is really challenging now in this landscape, and I promise I'll get directly to your question about what's the right message and how to prepare for it, is that the information landscape is so fragmented. You spoke a little bit to some of the recent challenges with, you have local media and you have these natural peer network groups, but now you have TikTok, right? Now we have Nextdoor. Substack has increased in the last year, or national news media reporters, these people that are trusted with their audiences, are leaving their newsrooms and creating their own media platforms, right? We're also seeing a trend in the corporate space where storytelling is becoming not only a need and a priority, but like the hottest hiring that corporate entities are doing now. And that's because our organizations are not seeing themselves as traditional companies anymore, right? They're seeing themselves quite literally as media companies. If you look at Utah Jazz or the Dallas Cowboys and all the sports teams, they consider themselves media companies, right? People are not as frequently going to an ESPN for the stats if they miss a game. They're going to the teams, right? They're going to the places where all the content's being created. They're creating shows right there. They are seeing themselves as media companies. If you're looking at the hottest brands right now, they are producing storytelling content and looking at their audiences, yes, as customers to buy their product, but first as audiences to engage regularly with authenticity to build trust. Look at Davos that just happened recently. One of the top growing segments of Davos is on corporate affairs and communications, which has traditionally been seen as support staff and a support entity within the C-suite, is now being considered and elevated as like the leading presence of C-suite and organizations, small and large, because your ability to carry a message, your ability to resonate with your audience, with your customers, is essential for your company. And it's not just through the silo of who you're trying to sell something to. It's now also, who are you building partnership with? How are you being perceived in the political landscape, right? These silos are now, whether you like it or not, converging. And that happens in a disaster like that, or the silos that we create naturally because we're a company and we don't get involved in politics, or we are trying to achieve those things. Those walls go away in a crisis. And this room knows that better than anyone, but that just elevates the need for the megaphone that you carry and the audiences that you've built in advance to be very strong. Do you have the ability to communicate directly with your customer base and your networks during a crisis? Because most of my clients are trying to come to me wanting front page New York Times coverage today. That's not going to happen. And that's even more competitive and difficult in a crisis when really we have to communicate where's water. But that doesn't mean that all the organizations that are involved in helping all the needs that happen in the community aren't as important. We just have to be better and savvier about how we're showing up to support people in ways that we may not be thinking about today. Because there is no one news outlet, there is no one organization, and there's no one communications channel that will do it. We have to be, unfortunately, everywhere. And we have to be thinking about communications as a huge asset that is invested in with the right people and resources to do it well.
So real quick, agitate, instigate, what was the last word?
Agitators, instigators, and innovators.
So on the point of communication and communicating in advance, because he's talking about advanced relationships, we've got an op-ed draft, don't we?
We are working on an op-ed draft.
Yeah.
It is on my plate to, I love this public accountability. This is fantastic.
He's really good at op-eds.
He's so savvy about keeping you on the hot seat. I love this. We're working on an op-ed that brings the idea of payments as a lifeline and information as a lifeline together to do something that I haven't really seen in my short time in the fintech space with all of you, seen happen very publicly, as aggressively as I think it should, which is to elevate your position directly and own it and be really aggressive with it, but also advocating for what you need to happen, right? There's a lot happening in the world, in Washington, D.C. and around the country, around what the future of the disaster construct will look like. There's a scenario in which every state in the country is going to have to create their own infrastructure to respond. That means there's a real opportunity for the fintech space to really own that, because you offer a solution that is so evolved from where traditional government has been and is on a macro level. And so we're trying to come together with that message to test it a little bit and kind of see how it lands.
Well, if anybody thinks that they can write an op-ed, I thought I could. Absolutely not. I handed it to Kristen. And it got crisp and precise. So that's an amazing, amazing skill set. Thank you for that. So Heather, you've talked about Ian and Irma. I've talked about Harvey. In any kind of chaos, let alone in disaster, people are trying to figure out who they can trust, where they can go. And like you guys have both mentioned, back in the Katrina days, it was more the three major networks, not local, but three major. And now you've got all of these platforms. And my husband's a college professor, and we have all kinds of folks of that generation through, and they do not trust regular news. Like it's a Reddit channel or TikTok. How do you get to communicating this is where you should go?
It's a weird time. I mean, even thinking of this, and I mean, you want to talk, we talked yesterday, I think Mark was talking about like God putting this together. To say this is a weird time, especially, I mean, even for me, right? I have created, I feel like I'm, Noah being asked to build this like virtual ark. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. All I know is that I have to do it. And the fact that this is done on the one point in time in the world where FEMA's kind of pulling back and now making it on the States, and the people don't know who to trust. And I'm like, I'm one of you. Like, I look at like a local standpoint, I'm like, I'm a local, I'm just like you guys, where I am totally neutral. I partner with everybody, to as long as they're legit and good. And I mean, I have, as far as resources go, we collect everything. I'm not tied to one race or religion. I'm like, I don't care. I have Christian, Baptist, Scientologists. I have the Islamic. I got you guys. As long as you're legit. But that's another reason I made it a nonprofit, is to try to be completely neutral. And right now we need that, where if you looked at what happened with Helene, to me, not gonna lie, it made me nervous a little bit, because you had, the groups in North Carolina. I mean, there were somewhere at times I'm like, we started a war here? What the heck is going on? Where people didn't know who to trust. They didn't know where to go. And the biggest part was that misinformation. But the other biggest part is the fact that it is the panic. It is coming to water. It is the people don't know where to go and what to do. But having that one platform and having that one hub where locals can find locals. It is, will always be neighbors helping neighbors during disasters. It's the true essence of grassroots. It's the one time where you do see the best of humanity. Sometimes you see the worst, dabbled in there once in a while, but it's the people that say, hey, I got you, and to be able to give a platform to them, where even Facebook, there's people, I was floored during Ian, where I was helping in Pine Island, and there were people that knew there were resources on Facebook, but because they didn't believe in Facebook or want to, use it, they were so anti-Facebook, they wouldn't open it. So the whole goal is to be completely neutral, but also be local centric, people centric, where, I'm not tied. I don't have the government background. I don't have the tie. I'm just out here to help my neighbors on a really, really big scale. So I think from that standpoint, where right now people are looking to go back to grassroots, and especially in disasters, that's what happens. It like I said, it was as will always be, neighbors helping neighbors, and that's what we showcase, and that's what we allow people to find. Because in my view, from the local that does raise the hand and help and say, hey, we got this, it's true community resiliency. Where that's what, to me, if you can find water from your neighbor, if you can find water from, a church group, or, it's all the organizations that pop up at random, where if you looked at, Sarasota, my gosh, we got hit 3 times in 2024. Last year, we got hit by Debbie, we got hit by, Helene, and of course, Milton. And from those, the organizations that stepped up, oh my gosh, the one group that got hit the hardest was our Amish village in Sarasota, and I'll be damned if they weren't the first people out there serving everybody else. Where those are, you're not going to see them on the news. You're not going to see that anywhere else unless locally, or unless that mom's group is saying, hey, go to Detweiler's, go here, go to Yoder's, go to. They're not going to do it. So from that standpoint, I think you really do. Because people are so uncertain of where to go, who to trust, what to do. They know they can count on their neighbor, and I think that's where they're going to go.
Heather, one of the things that has become very, very clear over the past 5 to 7 years is your neighbor is your first responder.
Absolutely.
And that's not to say that the county or the offices of emergency management or others. The reality is that you're really your own first responder.
Yeah.
But your adjacent neighborhood relationship, that's one. Second of all, it's kind of sad that we also have seen a lot of surveys and such. How many people don't know their neighbors?
Right.
Yeah.
And so, again, that building of the networks of trust is critical. But it's also, how do you activate them in a way where I may not know you, but I feel like I need to step up.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, it does. And even from when I first created this, I thought, okay, it's the top down. I'm thinking that's where you go, right? So one of the first things, I got an MOA with Florida Division of Emergency Management. Awesome. Got in my car. I'm like, 1 down, 49 to go. Cool. Right? So it's not, one thing I learned, it's not the state that controls the state. It's the counties that control the counties. It's the counties and the cities. The only thing consistent with the counties and the cities is that everyone operates totally differently. Where, there's some that use TikTok, some that use X, some that don't, some that use Facebook, some that their websites like from 1987, you don't know what the heck is on it or where to find it, but they swear everything's there. And that part is difficult. So you have the inconsistencies, and that from a local standpoint, how in the world do you find any of that?
So I've got I'll give you a point. One last question though. So we're about to get stuff done. How do we get that message out so that in our communities, local relief is there?
It's different with everybody.
Well,
that's why I said it's different. But as far
done.
as it's this, that's what I said before. It's this. It's people in the room. It's everything I do is connections. Everything I do is meeting people, and they say, "How can I help?" And I put it back on them and say, "You tell me about you. Tell me about your connections, your ties, your ideas, your thoughts."
So Heather, to Linda for Charlottesville, would Charlottesville call you? I mean, I'm trying to get down to what do you do to get this done?
Yeah, and that's what as far as people, it's all people and it really, it can be, I put a partnership with Girl Scouts. Girl Scouts right now with their cookie purchases are passing out local relief flyers. It can be through Rotary clubs. It's through the organizations that operate and that show up during disasters. In Sarasota, it was Mothers Helping Mothers. It was Streets of Paradise, and it was Dakin Dairy Farms. They showed up. So I say to the people that show up, those are the ones I want to reach.
Yeah. You have a question?
I just want us to have a payment app that's exactly like Heather has for all of this information resources. And they could, recommend each other, feed up each other, where it's content neutral, everybody can participate, but you've gotta have a single point of contact for people to go. They're not gonna know, okay, if you need this kind of relief, go here, this kind of relief, go there. So the SBA's on there. And then, there's a nonprofit wallet, or car, makes a wallet with a nonprofit bucket in it, maybe a place for, other donations, but we've got to get a single place for people to go from a payment standpoint that's just like that.
Technology wise, we can do it. The
Oh,
guy
yeah.
that developed our app is the same guy that patented Alexa and Amazon Web Services.
Oh, wow.
He
We have
knows
people in this
technology.
room that could stand up a program in a week.
Yeah, and that all day long.
Speaking of stand up, Marlon,
No, so I wanted to emphasize a point Justin made earlier about the value in communication and storytelling, particularly for small businesses coming out of disaster. That's one of the major lessons we learned on Maui is we wanted to get people out of the habit of the boys we, that sort of stagnation of telling about this horrible thing that happened to you. So out of sort of that communication, we created this mastermind concept that worked with small businesses to kind of meet them where they are. They didn't need help, creating business plans at that point. They've been in works for years, but they did need some coaching in how to restart, how to pivot out of a disaster. And storytelling, was identified as a critical need, right? In that, we wanted them to be able to had this 20/80 rule, right? That 20% of your communication coming out of a disaster, it may be this bad thing happened to me, but the other 80% of that needs to be, but this is what we're doing. This is how we're pivoting. This is what progress looks like for us. And we wanted to give them ideas of how to, regenerate new revenue, whether that's a gift card program or pre-ordering, working together in more collaborative sort of state and being able to tell that story. So I want to emphasize, that value for sure.
so Justin, you had a point.
I forgot what it was. Go on.
Sure, it was brilliant.
Go on.
So, thank you. Contact these guys while you're here, and thank you for coming up.